Mr. Summers, there are 7,700 permits unused. How many acres of public land are already leased by fossil fuel companies and not even used yet, just available or drilling whenever you decide?
Congresswoman, again, I think you have a fundamental misunderstanding as to how this process works and the time and resources.
Reclaiming my time. The answer is 13.9 million acres. To visualize how much land that is, if each grain of rice were 1 acre, that would be 479 pounds of rice. The American Petroleum Institute even opposed pausing more leasing on our lands. They even sued to stop it because apparently this acreage wasn't enough. Mr. Wirth, you serve on the American Petroleum Institute's executive committee. Do you support a pause on new oil and gas leases on federal land?
Congresswoman, access to resource in this country is essential to ensure the energy security of our country and
reclaiming my time. Mr. Lawler, do you support a pause?
The administration, and it's our hope that the pause ends soon. We think it's important to go
reclaiming
forward.
My time. Thank you for your answer. The answer there is no. Mr. Woods, do you support a pause on new federal and gas leases?
No.
Ms. Watkins, do you support a pause on new federal and gas leases?
No, I do not, because I think it's important.
You already have 13.9 million acres. This is equivalent to Maryland and New Jersey combined. How much more do you need? How much more acreage? You have 2 of our 50 states at a price that makes the Louisiana Purchase look like a ripoff, and you're not even using it. What more do you need? Iowa, Colorado, Virginia? Our public land belongs to the American people, not to big oil. When you lobby and you sue so that you could take more of our public land, you're saying too much is never enough. The American people are tired of this charade.
If I had to guess the moment where the fate of Mike Summers from the American Petroleum Institute was sealed, I'd probably say it was when he told Katie Porter that she has a fundamental misunderstanding of how the process works. Katie Porter. Yeah, not a great start. This is today's hearing on the fossil fuel industry and climate change, where Katie Porter, among other representatives, were given the opportunity to question oil company CEOs and industry executives. And this wasn't the only instance where she in particular faced off with one of these people. She called out the fact that Shell's 2020 annual report called for between $19 and $22 billion in near-term spending. Of that amount, $16 to $17 billion went to oil, gas, and chemical operations, with another $3 billion on marketing. And yet on renewable energy, they're spending between $2 and $3 billion. So while Shell President Gretchen Watkins has said, quote, meeting the demand for reliable energy while simultaneously addressing climate change is a huge undertaking and one of the defining challenges of our time, the way they want us to believe that huge undertaking is being done is by allocating all of, 9% of their spending on this? On the, quote, defining challenge of our time? They're allocating the same to their marketing budget for TV commercials as they are for climate change programs, and yet we're supposed to believe that Shell is definitely taking this issue seriously. Got it. What this is greenwashing, wherein all of these oil companies do the bare minimum to convince you that they're suddenly solely focused on sustainability and the environment. And so they'll spend exactly as much on marketing themselves as green as they do on actually being green. Again, Shell's budget for marketing is exactly the same as its budget for renewable energy. It's one thing to take some time to transition, but when the numbers are clearly showing that the transition is more of a gimmick than reality, that's when these companies should be rightfully called out. Now, of course, when pressed on any of these issues, these executives will push back by claiming that expanding their footprint with more oil and gas leases, for example, is essential to ensure the energy security of this country. That's the language it's wrapped in, energy security. You will be unsafe if oil executives don't stop expanding oil and gas leases on federal lands. And so even though in 2020, oil was the largest source of US energy-related carbon emissions, and even though climate change is already causing hundreds of billions of dollars in damage, even though hurricanes and wildfires and droughts exacerbated by climate change are killing people and wiping out crops and destroying neighborhoods, even though we are living through the disastrous effects of this phenomenon every single day, right now, somehow the real issue here, according to the oil and gas executives, is that we won't be secure if we fail to curb the insatiable expansion of oil and gas leases. Yeah, no, that totally checks out. In reality, it is literally the opposite. The oil and gas companies are what's endangering our security. It's not only risking lives, it's costing lives. And human toll aside, what happens when we can't compete with China because we failed to transition to renewables and they're lapping us on renewable manufacturing? What happens when other countries start selling that renewable energy to us and we become reliant on them? What happens when our enemies start selling cheap renewable energy to countries that we need as allies and we lose influence internationally? Burying our heads in the sand and pretending that the transition to renewables hasn't already begun isn't going to help us, it's going to hurt us. The only benefit will go to oil and gas executives who stand to personally profit from doing so. This is, per usual, about a few individuals getting rich off of the pain and suffering of 350 million other people. And frankly, good on Katie Porter for not treating these people with kid gloves. These people are unilaterally standing between a future for your kids and grandkids where they can breathe the air and drink the water and not inhale ash from wildfires, or watch their cars sink in flooded highways, or see their crops dry up in a perpetual heat wave. These are not imaginary things. This isn't alarmism, because all of this is happening right now. It's happening in California, in Texas, in Iowa, in New Jersey, in Florida. It's happening in red states and blue states, regardless of your political affiliation. And we need to start treating climate change and the people who are denying its impacts while simultaneously making off like bandits, like exactly the criminals that they are, for actively hurting this country so that they can own a fourth home in Jackson Hole or Palm Springs. I'm glad Katie Porter sees it, but until everyone does, on both the right and the left, nothing will change. We need to stop oil and gas subsidies. We need to block oil and gas leases on federal lands. We need to stop these leases at the state level. We need to block new pipelines. We need to promote solar farms and offshore wind farms. And we need to stop allowing these millionaires and billionaires to guide this country's energy policy with outdated and dangerous dictates. And until more people follow the lead of the Katie Porters out there, it's all of us, Republicans and Democrats, young and old, this generation and every generation in the future, that's going to suffer the consequences. And I don't think that's quite worth the price of a few $1,000s in campaign donations to some corrupt politicians. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.